What's up, everybody? I am your host, a self-centered trash can of a husband, and that is my co-host, Satan Baby. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we start our first episode of our Fan Appreciation Month, where the next 4 episodes have been chosen by you guys. First up is one of the most legendary horror films ever made, and during its span of 56 years has continually inspired the success of many other legendary horror films, including The Exorcist, The Omen, and even Hereditary and Get Out. So on this episode, we will be covering Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby from 1968, which was chosen by Carly Prinsloo. Hope I said your last name right. Which is a YouTube subscriber. Well, I don't know if she's a subscriber. I assume she is.
It doesn't tell us who the subscribers are.
Yeah, so hopefully she's a subscriber. If not, please subscribe.
If you did get her name wrong, she listens quite frequently, so I'd imagine she knows. You fuck up a name at least once an episode.
Oh, yeah. If you were ever expecting me to not mess up a name, an episode, you know, sorry. But it's at least once. It's kind of a staple of this show now.
It is. I feel like it wouldn't be the same show if there wasn't a name getting fucked up.
It's just part of the script now.
The best ones are when you add a name in there that didn't exist at all.
Oh, out of many episodes, I think that's happened at least 3 times.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head.
It happened in Ticks and Friday the 13th Part 7.
Ticks, I think someone called them a different name at one point. I really think that I heard that somewhere in the movie.
Well, I didn't hear it in the movie.
Well, you weren't paying close enough attention.
Yeah, I was slacking off, obviously. Maybe a giant tick got to your brain. You didn't even realize it.
It did a long time ago. But yeah, we just wanted to thank you guys for basically supporting the show and being really active on, the social medias and the listening platforms. We think you guys did some really good picks. We are really excited about all of them. And this is going to be a pretty fun 4 weeks.
Yeah, agreed. I absolutely love their reviews and people having recommendations. It's probably my favorite part of the show. We've been having these conversations for years, but to share them with people who enjoy it, it's definitely the most fulfilling part for me.
Well, this one's going to be really fun. I did a stupid amount of research on this movie. I read the book. I watched some videos. I watched this very long movie multiple times in a span of a few days. So I think we got some pretty good stuff. I think it's going to be good. I was looking forward to this. This is one of the picks that I was really looking forward to because I've never watched this movie and really dissected it the way I do, like how we do the movies for the show. We do them a lot differently than say we're just sitting down watching them. So
yeah, I hadn't seen this movie since my childhood, so my memory of it was very vague. So to actually sit down and cover it in detail was definitely a different experience. The movie came out, I think, at a really special time. I don't think this movie could have came out at any better of a time. You had the rise of the satanic and the occult and the mainstream media. And I think when this movie came out, it ruffled a lot of feathers.
Oh yeah, because they didn't have films at that time that kind of promoted, this kind of witchcraft, Satanism type deal. I mean, that's a humongous part of this movie. And back then, they didn't show a lot of movies like that. And especially considering that this is more of a very well done, high quality film. I mean, you had, of course, like the Grindhouse type films, but they were looked down upon. And then you got this movie, which is a very well made film, but is using a very kind of taboo subject matter for the time.
Yeah, to have the person the people who worked on this movie for it to be such a polished movie compared to other horror movies at the time. And it's sad because I know that some of the people that worked on this actually, because of the time it came out, took a lot of heat.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. This was controversial at the time.
Yeah, I know the producer specifically. He had a hard time. He got a lot of hate
Yeah.
mail, a lot of threats, caused some really bad depression on his part. That's sad. But with the time it came out at the same time, I think that's part of what cemented its legacy.
Yeah, so this is going to be a long one. Buckle up. This is, for one, a very long movie, and it's got a lot of stuff that comes with it. So get comfortable. But first, if you want to stay up to date on what is going on with us or the show, talk about or submit your movie request, or just say hey, you can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at grindhouse.horror.pod.com. Facebook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instagram at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many more, which you can find links for in the show notes as always. And please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. And if you really love us and don't want us to join a senior citizen satanic cult for success and fame, give us a review.
You know, it's interesting. This is the second movie in a row that we have covered sacrifice for fame. I just realized that.
So if you don't know, our last episode was Late Night with the Devil. And there was something that I almost included in that episode, but I decided to hold it back because I knew we were doing this next. And basically, I had, done a lot of research for that movie and looked up a lot of what like the Carnes brothers said about how they came up with the idea. So Jack Delroy is based off of Guy Woodhouse.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that a lot of connections there.
Yeah, when they wrote the character for Jack Delroy, they had kind of Guy Woodhouse in mind.
Gotta say, I like Jack better though.
Yeah, he's got more charisma.
He does.
I definitely will agree.
Jack had me sold. I was very let down on Jack at the end.
All right, so Rosemary's Baby is a 1968 American psychological horror film written and directed by Roman Polanski. Based on Ira Levin's 1967 novel of the same name, the film stars Mia Farrow as a newlywed living in Manhattan who becomes pregnant but soon begins to suspect that her neighbors are members of a satanic cult who are grooming her in order to use her baby for their rituals. The film deals with themes related to paranoia, women's liberation, Christianity, and the occult. It was released on June 12, 1968 by Paramount Pictures, which, by the way, was released 2 months after MLK's assassination. So this is a very crazy time for America when this came out.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And we'll get into this a bit more later on, but Sharon Tate, this was still in theaters and she was killed.
Yeah.
Which was the whole helter-skelter start of the race war thing. So definitely a crazy time.
Yeah, it was a critical and box office success, grossing over $33.4 million on a $3.2 million budget and received acclaim from critics. Since its release, Rosemary's Baby has been widely regarded as one of the greatest horror films of all time. In 2014, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, deeming it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The movie successfully launched a franchise which included a 1976 made-for-TV sequel and an up-and-coming streaming-exclusive prequel in a television series adaptation. So according to Paramount Pictures executive Robert Evans, a man named William Castle asked him to purchase the film's rights before the book was published in April of 1967. The studio head recognized the commercial potential of the project and agreed with the stipulation that Castle, who had a reputation for low-budget horror films, could produce but could not direct the film. If you don't know, William Castle did a lot of like B horror movies, and two of the biggest movies he did was House on Haunted Hill and 13 Ghosts. Alfred Hitchcock was first offered the chance to direct the film, but he declined. Evans admired Polanski's European films and hoped he could convince him to make his American debut with Rosemary's Baby. Polanski read the book nonstop through the night and called Evans the following morning to tell him he would like the opportunity to write as well as direct the film. After negotiations, Paramount agreed to hire Polanski for the project with a budget of $1.9 million, $150,000 of which would go to Polanski. Polanski originally wanted his wife Sharon Tate to play the leading role of Rosemary, but decided to cast someone else because he deemed it to be unethical. Looking at you, Rob Zombie.
Yeah. Yeah, he does not. He doesn't hold those same levels of standards. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Could you imagine, though, had Sharon Tate?
Yeah.
Because this movie had already hit theaters, so they couldn't have pulled it. Could you imagine the notoriety it would have? It already had tons of notoriety. It was seen as extremely controversial at the time. And then if you added that on top of it. So I did a lot of the cursed film background because this is considered one of the cursed films. And I could only imagine how much more cursed people would consider it.
Oh yeah.
Had that been the case.
Yeah, the leading actress of this huge film gets murdered in the way, especially the way that it happened. Yeah, maybe in an alternate reality that is a thing.
Yeah, and Sharon Tate was, it's never been officially confirmed, but there's people who was close to her that said she did dabble into the occult. And I mean, that would have just been crazy.
It is a rumor. It's never been verified that she actually played an extra in the background of the party scene.
Yeah, I did. I actually did read that.
Yeah, because we know that she was on set. I believe she was Mia Farrow's understudy. But yeah, I mean, it's never been confirmed.
Yeah, I was wondering because when I read it, it read as fact, but it was the only place I seen that mentioned, and specifically Shudder has a Cursed Films show. But for those who don't know, they have a they had a Cursed Film show, and they did an episode on this, and it was not mentioned in that. So I figured it was probably one of those things that wasn't 100% verified.
So television actress Mia Farrow, who was mostly known for being married to Frank Sinatra at the time, was cast as the main character, Rosemary Woodhouse. Principal photography for Rosemary's Baby began on August 21st, 1967 in New York City. The Dakota's exterior served as the location for the fictional Bramford, by the way, which is where John Lennon was shot and killed.
Yeah, that carries some significance. I'll get to a little bit later on.
So Levin modeled it on buildings like the Dakota in the novel. Hutch even urges Rosemary and Guy to move into the Dakota instead of the Bramford. When Farrow was reluctant to film a scene that depicted a dazed and preoccupied Rosemary wandering into the middle of Fifth Avenue into oncoming traffic, Polanski pointed to her pregnancy padding and told her, "No one's going to hit a pregnant woman." The scene was successfully shot with Farrow walking into real traffic and Polanski following, operating the handheld camera. By September 1967, the shoot had relocated to Paramount Studios in Hollywood, where interior sets of the Bramford apartments had been constructed on sound stages. Some additional location shooting took place in Playa del Rey in October of 1967. Though Paramount had initially agreed to spend $1.9 million to make the film, the shoot was overextended due to Polanski's meticulous attention to detail, which resulted in his attempting up to 50 takes of a single scene. The shoot suffered significant scheduling problems as a result, and ultimately went $400,000 over budget. In November of 1967, it was reported that the shoot was now over 3 weeks behind schedule. Filming was further disrupted when midway through filming, Faro's husband, Frank Sinatra, served her divorce papers via a corporate lawyer in front of the cast and crew.
You know why?
Yes.
It was over that haircut. That's what it was. She cut that fucking hair off and he's like, I'm done.
Yeah, a little bit of background with the Frank Sinatra was he originally wanted her to give up her career when she married him. And she refused to do that, and then she went and did this movie, which he didn't want her to do it. She was supposed to be done with this movie and then go film a movie with him. And because this ran over the schedule, she ended up not being able to get there. And he told her basically, like, you quit this movie now, or it's me or the movie.
What a nice guy. He sounds that.
Yeah.
What a fantastic gentleman that was. Like, you have to quit your career. But if you're going to keep going, you have to do this movie with me.
Yeah. In an effort to salvage her relationship, Faro asked Evans to release her from her contract, but he persuaded her to remain with the project after showing her an hour-long rough cut and assuring her that she would receive an Academy Award for her performance. She didn't, by the way. Filming was completed on December 20th, 1967 in Los Angeles. All right, so ratings. Rotten Tomatoes, 96%. That's not surprising. As much as this movie is talked about and loved and how legendary it is, I will say I'm a little surprised they didn't give it like a 99%.
Yeah, for what this movie is really loved for, which a lot of that is the cinematography and how it was shot. I know they used this in a lot of film schools.
Yeah.
As an example for teaching. So and you know Rotten Tomatoes loves those movies, so no surprise there.
IMDb gave it an 8 out of 10. Letterboxd gave it a 4.2 out of 5. And the average audience rating from Google is a 4.1 out of 5. I think that is the highest rating we've ever seen from Letterboxd.
Yeah. You know, it being known as classic and one of the most significant horror movies to go down, that doesn't surprise me that it's a little higher, but I actually think those ratings are pretty well on.
Yeah, I agree. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming on MGM, Paramount Plus, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, YouTube TV, and the Roku channel, all with premium subscription.
Pretty much everywhere except Tubi.
Not on Tubi. All right. You want to jump into this plot?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this film starts out with shots of the New York City skyline. By the way, the La 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 song in the intro was sung by Mia Farrow. We then see this beautiful, huge apartment building. It looks kind of like a goth Buckingham Palace. It is like a dark brown with like tons of detailed craftsmanship and a lot of pointy roofs.
Lots of pointy roofs.
Yes, a lot.
They were very pointy roofs back then.
And this is going to be where our story takes place. It is kind of a high society, only like penthouse apartment building, and it is named the Bramford. We then see a young couple walking with a man who is wearing the most baggiest suit I have ever seen. This suit is easily 2 sizes too big, and it's wrinkly.
Yeah, no dry cleaners available at the time.
I mean, you think that fancy place has a dry cleaner in it. Or a tailor.
Maybe he's a fake it till you make it.
His suit
he don't really live there.
His suit is awful. But that's a bad suit. But these three are walking into the Bramford. Baggy Suit Man is on the way to show the couple a unit that will soon be available to rent. This is also where we meet our two main characters, local actor Guy Woodhouse and his wife Rosemary Woodhouse. Once inside, we see this place is very old and very fancy. They do not build buildings like this anymore.
No, a baggy suit guy, which I just called him the renter salesman
guy.
They're going up this elevator and he's like explaining all these changes that were made. And I have no idea what the fuck he's saying.
No. Well, we'd never been in a building like that.
Well, neither had they. They were on the
Yeah,
way up.
yeah. But Baggy Suit Man explains that a longtime tenant named Mrs. Gardenia recently passed away and her son is planning to move her possessions out of the apartment very soon. Rosemary is very concerned and asked if the old lady happened to pass away inside the apartment. He tells her that no, she didn't, that she actually had been in a coma for weeks and suddenly died in the hospital.
Looking back on this, that she was in a coma kind of maybe had some significance. May not. She maybe had just died of old age. But I wonder if maybe getting her out of that apartment may have been part of the plan.
Well, I will shed some light on that in a little bit. We see inside that this lady has basically just shit everywhere, just stuff.
Not
Not actual shit.
not actual
just
shit.
stuff everywhere.
She's not on an episode of Hoarders.
That apartment is, pretty close to being packed to the brim. There's just stuff everywhere. We also see that the old lady had a fairly large herb garden in one of the rooms. Rosemary spots a desk she really likes and walks over to look at it, and laying amongst all of the scattered around paperwork on the desk, she spots the bottom of a letter written by Mrs. Gardenia that says, "I can no longer associate myself." So we are only like 4.5 minutes into the film, and we are starting to get clues about this situation that's going on in the building. You don't recognize how big of clues they are until later on, but this movie immediately starts giving you these little hints. Like, this is very much a movie that you really have to pay attention to the little details.
Or watch it twice.
Or that.
I mean, even watching it years and years ago, coming back and watching it again, you kind of forget a lot of this stuff. But yes, they're definitely dropping big hints from the very beginning. And I love that. I love when movies do that.
So while walking through, Baggy Suit Man just notices a big ass. Well, he calls it a secretary, but it's a dresser. I'm just gonna call it a dresser because this looks like a dresser to me.
This is a dresser.
Is a secretary like a fancy way to say dresser?
I thought a secretary was somebody who worked for you and did your paperwork and set your appointments and shit like that.
Apparently it's also an antique dresser. I don't know.
Maybe it worked for a bigger dresser.
A bigger dresser, yes. It's an XL dresser. But anyway, this big-ass dresser is standing at the end of this hallway, and Baggy Suit Man finds it odd because he knows that there is a hallway closet behind it. Why would an old lady block off her closet, and how could she have moved it by herself? While the two men attempt to slide it out of the way, Rosemary spots the impression marks on the floor where it used to sit, and the marks that it made on the floor where it had been slid from its spot to in front of this door.
Nobody will notice there's a door behind this.
So, for me, this whole scene with the apartment showing, it makes you feel like so scrunched up. And it's almost like the hallway's not even big enough to really comfortably get through with the big dresser sitting in the hallway. Like, there's just so much stuff crammed in here. And then we get these camera angles that are like, you're cramped with the people. And then I found out that that was actually all done on purpose. The whole continuous shot and everything. They did very minimal cuts. I want to say there's 2 cuts and like 1 or 2 edits in this whole entire scene because they wanted to show the audience the claustrophobia of the apartment. And it's so well done.
Yeah, that was the uneasy feeling. And you already got this kind of, with the whole dresser situation, like when what was going on here, you as a viewer, you're like, you know something's up with that closet. You have the whole mysterious, the lady died, the coma, but she's got all her stuff still in here, and it's got that, like you said, that claustrophobic, but it's that really uneasy. It's a much different feeling than whenever they do move in and everything is moved out.
It's night and day. It's very different. But yeah, this was
very,
great.
very dark too. That's another thing. It's very dark in there.
Yeah, this whole scene and the cinematography and everything and how they did it is phenomenal. Like, I see why they would teach this in film school because it's very impressive. So after the showing, we see Guy and Rosemary walking down a busy New York sidewalk as Rosemary tells Guy how much she loves the apartment. Did you notice that while they're walking, there's like people in the background that are kind of looking at them, kind of weird? And there's like two people that look directly into the camera?
No.
Okay,
Terrible extras.
so this is because they were not extras. They were actually real New Yorkers and they were confused about what the fuck was going on here.
Those are called free extras.
Yeah, that Roman Polanski would just roll right on out there to, the street, the sidewalk, whatever, and just film right there.
Nowadays, you have to like blur those people out.
God. Next, we see Rosemary and Guy having dinner with their current landlord and very good friend, Hutch. Hutch is an older gentleman who is a published author, well-educated, and has lived in the city for most of his life. When Rosemary first moved to New York, Hutch was her first really good friend, and they have maintained that friendship ever since.
Yeah, Hutch gives off good vibes.
Yeah.
He does.
I think Hutch is great.
Right from the beginning. And the direction that this movie goes, where it gets to a point where you don't know who you can trust, you're really paranoid.
Can always trust Hutch.
Hutch is that one that you're like...
Well, I think he's asking the questions that us, the audience, are thinking.
Yeah.
So we kind of get that you're on the same level with him, because he's basically speaking for us. So Hutch says that he would be fine with letting them out of their lease, but he wishes that they would change their mind about moving to the Bramford. He then proceeds to tell them about the apartment's unpleasant reputation over the years. This includes the Trench sisters, who were two proper Victorian ladies who cooked and ate several young children, including their own niece. Also, Adrian Micardo, who practiced witchcraft. And they said something funny here. He says that he made his big splash in the 90s. And I was like, the 90s?
I had to actually put that in my notes too. I'm like, that threw me off.
Yeah. I was like, oh, he means the 1890s. Like, this shit's old.
Yeah.
But yeah, he made his big splash by announcing that he conjured up the living devil. And people got pissed and attacked and beat him in the lobby of the Bramford. In a world where religion is such a huge part of society and witchcraft of any sort is demonized, why the fuck would you announce it to everyone? Like, you should probably keep that to yourself.
Yeah, well.
And he got his ass beat for it.
He paved the way.
Yeah. So there was also Keith Kennedy, who held some kind of notorious parties, and a dead baby was found in the cellar in 1959, which it is important to note that that wouldn't be too far in the past for our characters here, because this story takes place in 1960. It's currently, in this part of the story, 1965, but we also go into 1966.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually didn't catch that. That was only 6 years from when the story starts.
Yeah. Hutch also informs us that because of its history, the building is nicknamed Black Bramford. So next up, we see that Guy and Rosemary have moved into the now empty apartment. While unpacking boxes in their bedroom, they notice that they can hear their neighbors through the wall. Later on, while Rosemary is down in the basement laundry room, she meets another young woman who is similar in age. They spark up a conversation, and we learn that this lady's name is Terry Ginfanero. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce her name, so that's what I got.
And do you know who Terry is, the actress?
I do. We actually watched that Playboy Murders show on her. Yeah. I will say she's better looking in video than the pictures they showed of her, because she looked very 70s when we seen her before.
She was very good looking back in the day. She's rough now. But she was actually in the Shudder cursed films.
Oh, really?
When I seen her,
she's out of jail now.
Yeah. So when I seen her, it was very familiar. I'm like, where the fuck do I know this lady from? And then I realized we watched this show. It's called The Playboy Murders. They cover Playboy
murders,
yes. Yep. And this one actually was an episode that I thought was just kind of playing off of a major story. Most of the episode was just talking about the Sharon Tate murders, and she was really good friends with Sharon Tate and was supposedly, according to her, invited to the house that night that the murders took place, but decided not to go. And this really fucked her up and sent her life on a downward track. She ended up on drugs and stuff and shot her husband. And she didn't kill him. He's actually in the documentary too.
She tried.
She definitely tried. She shot him in the back. It went through his lungs, like some small measurement away from his heart.
There's always 2 more centimeters over.
And but he was in the documentary too. But yeah,
how the fuck was he in the documentary? He was just a regular guy when they got married.
Yeah, he played in some band. They had him in it though, talking about getting shot. And now, since that was recorded, that episode we had seen, she's out now.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting, though. She was a Playmate of the Year around the time this movie came out.
She explains that she is living with the Castavets, who happen to be Rosemary's neighbors. She says that she was a drug addict and prostitute who had hit rock bottom, and the Castavets found her on the street and took her in. She also shows Rosemary a necklace and a charm that the Castavets gifted her that is supposedly a good luck charm. Rosemary looks at it closely and notices there is some kind of herb inside of the charm, and it has a very strong smell.
Definitely red flags. Soon as you see this charm and it's got a bad smell, you definitely know that there is something significant with this. Red flags.
One other thing Terry just happens to mention is Mrs. Gardenia was a good friend of Mr. and Mrs. Castavet. She would come over often and bring herbs and spices she grew in her garden for Mrs. Castavet to use. So you get a little bit more of a hint into what happened before.
Mm-hmm.
While Guy and Rosemary are getting ready to go to bed, they begin to hear Mrs. Castavet yelling at her husband, and then we hear her say, "If you want my opinion, we shouldn't tell her at all." Guy cracks a joke about it, and he and Rosemary begin to make out on the bed. While laying there, they then begin to hear people chanting. The next night, while Guy and Rosemary are walking home, they come upon a group of people gathered at the entrance of their building. They walk through the crowd and right into a police officer when Guy looks down to see a very bloody Terry laying dead on the sidewalk.
Yeah, so this spot, and I've read in multiple different places, but according to the Shudder documentary, this is the exact spot, or almost the exact spot, that John Lennon was actually shot and killed. And that is significant because, one of the big things about the curse is the Sharon Tate murders. So when Charles Manson first started going off and becoming crazy, he got obsessed with the Beatles' White Album.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the Helter Skelter comes from. And he believed that they were trying to secretly speak to him about this race war that was going to happen. And a lot of people probably know the Tate murders was the start of trying to start that said race war. Also, on the very next Beatles album, I think it was on the album, there is a very iconic picture of John Lennon and the rest of the Beatles walking across the street.
Yeah.
That was actually taken a couple hours before the Sharon Tate murders.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That picture was taken on the same day that the murders actually happened. So a lot of interesting connections with the Beatles and Charles Manson to the Sharon Tate murders, which was the wife of Roman Polanski, who directed this movie. So very, very interesting.
Full circle. So Rosemary informs the officers of the identity of the woman and explains to them that she was living with their neighbors, the Castavets. Then one of the officers walks over with Terry's suicide note, and it is concluded that she jumped out of the window and killed herself. Just then, the Castavets come walking down the sidewalk, completely oblivious to what is going on. The officers inform them of Terry's suicide. This is our first introduction to the Castavets. We have Minnie, who is a very loud, energetic, and nosy older lady, and Roman, who is a very well put together, intelligent, and confident man. Minnie has a hard time believing Terry killed herself, but Roman claims it is no surprise because she would get deeply depressed from time to time. Later on, while Rosemary is laying in bed, we see she is kind of like dreaming, but she can also hear Minnie through the bedroom wall. And Minnie says, "Sometimes I wonder how you are the leader of anything."
Did you catch Terry's body when they showed it from the further back angle? It looks like she caught her head on the edge of that Volkswagen Beetle that's
I know the
behind it.
side of her face is just blood.
So did you catch the Beetle, the top of it?
No,
The top
see
of it
that.
is completely dented in. Like she fell off and hit her fucking face. That's why her blood splattered all over the Beetle. She
Or
actually obviously hit her, I would imagine, her face based off of what her face looks like. But that's something I never caught from that scene before.
they made a concrete version of her
They did.
and she fell, and then they had explosives in the car, like in Child's Play.
Well, I would agree with that theory, but Child's Play was groundbreaking on making concrete bodies and throwing them out.
Oh, yes,
That was
that's
a new
true.
thing. This Beetle wasn't that fucked up. Just the corner of the top was like
It didn't explode.
massively dented in.
Oh, yeah. So then we also hear Minnie say, "If you would have listened to me, we wouldn't have to do this. And we wouldn't have to start all over again. And I told you not to tell her in advance that she wouldn't be open-minded." You get a ton of information from that. Like that, when you first see the movie, of course, you don't know why all this stuff is important. But yeah, there's a lot of information that you kind of get from just those couple sentences that are kind of confusing because it's almost like it's Rosemary's dream, but what she's hearing and what she's dreaming are not they're not matching up.
I missed a lot of the audio in that.
Oh man, yeah,
That's
it's muffled, but you can hear
is.
her from the other side of the wall.
It didn't pick up on the captions, I don't think.
Yeah, so basically what they're saying is, for one, we now know Roman is the leader of something. Another thing is Minnie did not want to tell Terry something. And then we got Minnie basically saying, "I told you she wouldn't be open-minded to it, and now we have to start all over." So yeah, you get a lot of hints about something.
Yeah, that makes me, because I had a theory with Terry, and that kind of, I think, kind of strengthens what my theory was, and that was that the roles were kind of reversed, and that they were trying to use her to have a baby.
They originally were, yeah.
And she wasn't open to it, and she killed herself because they had that charm on her with that root they were kind of using to keep her fucked up. And obviously that didn't work, and I guess they decided on the second attempt that they probably shouldn't let the woman in on the secret.
Yep. So the next day, Minnie rings Rosemary's doorbell and properly introduces herself. They talk a little bit about Terry, Roman, Guy, and the apartment. After a bit of conversation in the kitchen, Minnie asks Rosemary if her and Guy would like to come to dinner at their place later, and Rosemary agrees. When Guy arrives home, Rosemary excitedly greets him, but he doesn't look too pleased with himself. He then informs her that Donald Baumgart got the big part in the up-and-coming play. Rosemary tries to cheer him up and then tells him about the dinner at the Castevet's apartment. Later on in the evening, Guy and Rosemary arrive at Roman and Minnie's for dinner, and they all sit and have a drink while waiting for the food. And we find out that Roman is a very cultured man because he has lived all over the world. They then discuss the anticipated arrival of the Pope here in New York City, and Roman doesn't have too many pleasant things to say about organized religion.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that I disagree with Roman on what he was saying about some organized religion, but that's not a conversation you generally have with people you just met. That's a red flag too. And there's a lot of people out there like that, though.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, at least on the other side, my experience, we live in the South. A lot of people, especially with my job, I talk to a lot of people. They will completely
Shoehorn it right in there.
Yeah, they will start talking about their religion as if you follow the exact same thing without even asking you. And this was kind of the opposite. It's like when people get old, they're like, we don't have time to get to know somebody. We're going to
Yeah.
get straight down to business.
Yeah, so Roman apologizes for offending Rosemary, but Rosemary explains that she was raised Catholic, but doesn't really know and isn't offended by Roman's opinion on the matter. When talking about the Pope, Roman says, "You don't need to have respect for him because he pretends that he is holy." And me and Guy both agree with him on that.
Yes, I think that was a three-way agreement.
Yeah. So after dinner, while Rosemary is in the kitchen helping Minnie with the dishes, she notices that Minnie has recently started her own herb garden. And while her and Minnie are talking, Guy is in the living room smoking cigars with Roman. I want to point this out because I think this is important and I want to see if you caught it. When Minnie and Rosemary finish up in the kitchen and they walk into the living room, did you see the look on Guy's face? And he suddenly jumps up. And it's almost like he just found out some really disturbing or crazy shit. And when they go back to their apartment, Guy is really fucking happy and excited.
He is. He clearly had a good time for somebody who didn't want to go there. I didn't notice that necessarily. I noticed how excited he was when they got back to the apartment.
Yeah, but the look on his face when Minnie walks in.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, but I did notice something very interesting in the way they did the cinematography for the shot right before that. And it's whenever they're in there doing the dishes and they do a shot back through the doorway of them in the living room, but they have the cigar smoke so you know they're there, but they're far enough away where you can't hear their conversations. And they actually do this with the cinematography a lot in this movie. They purposely shoot it in a way that you know something's happening, but you're left out of a whole side of the story to kind of leave you guessing. And it does.
Yeah, they do another shot, that same area you're talking about, where it's the shot kind of through the doorway into the kitchen, and we see Minnie's doing the dishes and Rosemary's drying them or whatever, and you see Minnie's herb garden in the background, and you see how new it is because everything's small. When you seen the other ladies, everything was huge.
Yeah.
So this tells you that she very recently had to start this herb garden, and we'll find out why later.
And that's one of the things that makes this movie great is it's constant. It's not a little thing, like one or two things throughout the movie. When you go back and watch this knowing the story, you realize they're constantly throwing hints at you pretty much throughout the whole movie.
Oh yeah, that is why I think this is such a great movie, because I love when movies do this. We can go back, if you ever watched this movie and thought, man, I wish that I could see when they told Guy about this thing going on. You do, you really do. It's just so quick and so subtle. You don't realize that that's what they just told him. It's just really cool. You really have to go into this thing eagle-eyed with already knowing the story and pick up the clues as you're watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a fantastic job at that. And I thought it was really interesting. I mentioned the doorway scene, and you noticed one too. That's something that I noticed they actually do throughout this movie. And it's almost like anytime there is some secretive stuff going on, they do a really good job of showing you that it's happening, but shooting it in a way outside of a doorway where you can't exactly pick up what's going on. And the first time you watch this movie, you don't really know what's going on, so you don't think anything of it.
So while they are undressing and getting ready for bed, despite Guy's earlier uninterest in getting to know the Castevets, he tells her he found Roman's stories very interesting and he plans on returning tomorrow evening to hear more. During this conversation, Rosemary wonders why Roman and Minnie removed all of their pictures from the walls, saying she noticed the aging and discoloration from where the pictures had hung for years. Guy blows this off and admits that he didn't even notice. The next day, while Guy is hanging out with Roman, Minnie heads on over to Rosemary's apartment and introduces her to her friend and fellow tenant, Laura Louise. She then hands Rosemary a gift wrapped in tissue paper, telling her it is from her and Roman. Rosemary opens it to find the 300-year-old silver necklace and charm that once belonged to Terry. Rosemary is stunned at first but accepts the gift. Minnie then explains that the herb inside of the charm is called tannis root and is for good luck. After Minnie leaves, we see Rosemary put the necklace away in a jewelry box, and if you notice, as she's putting it away, Guy is encouraging her to wear it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's already
Mm-hmm.
already seems like he may be on the train. I gotta say, these fucking two old ladies, these two judgmental ass old ladies just coming in, barging their way in and sitting down on my couch
And starts like
knitting.
sewing, yeah.
Yeah, that would drive me nuts. I'd be like, I'm sorry, but you old rich bitches gotta get the fuck out of my house.
Yeah, so when I read the book, and I will say that it was almost pointless because this movie is almost word for word the book. I mean, down to everything they say, how they say it, even stuff like this where the two women come in and start knitting. I mean,
Yeah, I did read that it was really, really close to the book. And for Roman Polanski coming in, it was more of how they were gonna shoot it because the story was already so good.
yeah, that's his version. I do know that the producer said something about Polanski didn't realize that he could make changes to work, like somebody else's work, when he was adapting it. I don't know if I really believe that. I think it's more like Roman Polanski thought that the structure and the storytelling was so good already that there was no reason to really mess with it.
I think that's great. I hate when they take a great book and change it and do a bunch of shit to it and fuck it up. So I'm glad that although he could have went in and wrote and changed things up, I'm glad he didn't.
So the next day, Guy stays home and just hangs out in the apartment with Rosemary when suddenly the phone rings. Guy almost gives himself whiplash trying to answer it, and once he picks it up, he is informed that Donald Bumgart suddenly, without any explanation, went totally fucking blind when he woke up this morning.
Well, son of a bitch.
And the leading role has now been given to Guy. Well, what luck.
Yeah, and if Guy's gonna be hardcore on that train now, say that.
Yeah, so after Guy tells Rosemary, he then walks around the apartment, seemingly having a conflicting feeling about getting the part because of someone else's misfortune. He tells Rosemary that he needs to take a walk around the neighborhood to think it over. Rosemary agrees, and Guy walks out the front door. So they filmed it, and it was something that got cut, and it is also in the book, but when he says he has to go for a walk, Rosemary actually goes over to the window and looks out of the window and watches for Guy to come out of the apartment building, and he never does.
Yeah.
Which means he went over to Roman's.
I actually put that in my notes. I said, what do you mean he has to get out and walk around? Where is he going? I have a feeling he's going next door.
So a few days later, after Rosemary spends some time over at Hutch's apartment, she returns home to find roses placed all over the kitchen. Guy then greets her and tells her that he feels like an asshole for being so concerned with his career and hasn't shown her any attention. But now that is all gonna change. And not only that, but Guy is finally ready to have a baby and wants to start soon.
Yeah, I know I've been a shitty husband, but I want to make it up to you. Let's have a baby. Awful idea.
Yep.
Babies don't fix awful husbands.
They probably make them worse.
Yes, they make them more awful. They definitely should have left it at flowers.
Yeah, so Rosemary is obviously extremely happy to hear this because you find out earlier that she's been wanting to have kids for a long time and Guy just hasn't been ready. Fast forward to baby making night. The Woodhouses are planning to have a nice romantic night at home. Guy lights a fire, plays some calming music, and pours some alcoholic beverages. We then see them eating a candlelight dinner when suddenly we hear the doorbell ring. Guy jumps up to answer it, and as the camera stays on Rosemary at the table, we can slightly hear Minnie's voice in the background. A moment later, Guy returns with 2 chocolate desserts, claiming that Minnie had 2 extras and decided to give them to Guy and Rosemary. What a nice neighbor. Rosemary takes a few bites but complains it has a chalky undertaste and that she doesn't like it. Guy attempts to make her feel bad for not eating it until she finally agrees, and when Guy gets up to change the record, we see Rosemary dump the rest of it out in a napkin, pretending like she has eaten the whole thing. If you notice, Rosemary's had a little red, some kind of red decoration on the top. You actually see her remove it before she starts eating it.
Thought it was a cherry.
It could have been. It was real small, but Guy's did not.
Yeah. Keep them separated.
You gotta keep them separated.
After the whole necklace thing, I found that really creepy. I wouldn't have wanted to be given a necklace that was just on a girl who committed suicide. Because I don't know if you noticed, but when they showed her body, when Terry jumped out, they made it very obvious that the necklace was on her when she did it. So I would have been a little weirded out after that. I don't know if I would have wanted to eat anything that she brought over. And then Guy, he gets very, very aggressive over her not wanting to eat it.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel really bad for her in this situation. I would be very confused.
You know, honestly, after watching this movie, multiple times and watching it real close, I don't know how, when the first time I watched it, which I don't remember when I think I might have been a teenager when I first watched it, but I do remember totally being kind of shocked about, what we find out about Guy. And now I wonder, how did they not see it? And they do a really good job of making you not see it. But once you know and you start looking for it, you start to see how Guy does all these things that are very much steering her into a direction.
Yeah. And I guess you could take that on a first watch as, maybe he's just an oblivious asshole. Yeah. Maybe he's just, he obviously gives off those vibes anyway. For them to have trusted him with what they did, I mean, they got him on board really quick. It was all over. They obviously read how selfish he was. He was probably a narcissist.
Oh, yeah.
He only cared about himself and his career. And they picked that up and trusted that enough to try to bring him aboard night one. And it worked. I mean, but the first time watching this movie, it actually takes a long time till you really pick up on that he's in on this.
So after dinner, while in the kitchen, we see Rosemary begin to feel dizzy and lightheaded. She almost falls, and Guy helps her to the bedroom. As she lays on the bed, she begins to fall asleep. Guy reassures her that they will make a baby another night and that she just needs a good night's rest, and encourages her not to fight the sleep. We then see that she begins to dream about being on a boat with John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie during a party. Guy then begins to undress her while she is sleeping. While on the dream boat, she sees Hutch standing on the dock staring at her. She asks if he is coming, but President Kennedy says Catholics only. And we then see Guy remove Rosemary's wedding ring, which was a detail that I have never noticed until this time.
Yeah.
And I guess it's because the wedding ring is like a promise to God that you're going to love this person. And in order for what's about to happen, she probably doesn't need to have that on.
I seen it, but I never really thought of the reasoning for it, the significance of it.
So Rosemary then walks down a set of black stairs and past a painting that shows the Vatican on fire. I have a theory, and I don't know if this is for sure, but she's in this very dimly lit room with only a fireplace and a bed in the center. I think this is Roman and Minnie's living room because it has that same picture in the same spot that we'll see later on. And I'm pretty sure it's the same fireplace.
You mean and they over at Roman and Minnie's apart?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree because we see it late at the end of the movie when we get to see their actual apartment with everything hanging up where they haven't covered everything up. It is. I agree with you. I think it's definitely the same.
Yeah, it looks like they cleared out their living room and put this bed in the middle, and that's where this is going to happen.
Yeah, 'cause I think it's clear that it is not Rosemary's room.
No. She then lays naked on the bed and is quickly surrounded by a group of naked bodies, including Laura Louise, Guy, and Minnie. For some reason, Abe Lincoln is standing on top of the fireplace. Roman, who is wearing some kind of robe, then uses a long paintbrush and begins painting symbols on Rosemary's body using red paint. We then see a grotesque demon hand run its claws down Rosemary's body. We catch a kind of side glimpse of the demon, and we assume it can only be Satan himself. He has a very rough and deformed dark red and black skin. He then climbs on top of Rosemary for some sex.
Is Guy technically a cuck now?
Yes.
Maybe.
Officially.
He just watched
Got his cuck card.
I don't really know how to say that. Would be a BBC, a BBRC, BBRC. Yeah, he just watched his wife get slammed down on the bed, and it was rough. Apparently, yeah. I don't know if sex with Satan could not be rough, but yes, Guy is officially the cuck of the movie,
and he deserves it. Rosemary opens her eyes once he enters her sexy fun time zone, and we see that she sees for a moment dark red skin, big eyebrows, and yellow and red eyes like a poisonous snake. Rosemary then realizes that this isn't a dream and this is really happening. She begins to panic when one of the group places a black cloth bag over her face. We see that the group is holding her down while Satan moves to the rhythm of R&B hit classic Pony by the artist Genuine.
Nice.
He is grinding.
Good stuff.
The Pope then shows up asking about a mouse bite, and at this point, I had to wonder if I myself were high as hell, because that would be the only thing that would make sense of why the Pope, Abraham Lincoln, and the Kennedys were here to watch Satan bust a demon nut.
Yeah. For one, I gotta say, I see Satan laying the dick down to something a little heavier.
He had this rhythm that was like R&B rhythm.
Maybe this was the start, and then it picks up, ends up finishing on some like Custer by Slipknot.
That's a drastic change.
Like cut me up and fuck. She's got cuts all over her body. Yeah, I think clearly how this ended. No doubt in my mind. Do you think Mr. Cuck Guy sat over in the corner and just masturbated thinking about his future success?
Oh yeah, he probably watched his Yamaha commercial while this was going on. Did you happen to catch that when the Pope goes to have Rosemary kiss his ring, it's actually the necklace charm with the tannis fruit in it?
I did.
Yeah.
I did catch that.
Nice.
I caught it, but I wasn't to the point where I was 100% sure.
Mm.
I was like pretty sure that's what it was, but that's something I was actually going to ask you about.
So the next morning, Guy wakes up Rosemary to inform her it is time to get up and make breakfast because he has a meeting to attend to. Fuck this dude. He literally drugged his wife and allowed the Dark Prince himself to raw dog her against her will while a crowd of old naked people watched, and you won't even make your own goddamn breakfast. What a piece of shit.
Yeah, this guy sucks. I mean, even not my wife, just a female I didn't know. I couldn't imagine watching like this beast of Satan rape a woman.
Lay that devil dick.
It's okay, because I'm gonna be rich. It's all good. This is what like Donald Trump did. This is how Donald Trump got rich. Where's Donald Trump's first wife? Yeah, and even in Rosemary's perspective, even if this was all a dream, your husband just had sex with your completely unconscious body, which is, I mean, you're married. It's if you're okay with it, if you're down with that, you're down with it. She didn't seem like she was all that down with it, but the fact that she's scratched up and shit, I would be a little concerned. What are you into? Like,
She sits up in bed to discover that she is still unclothed and now her torso is covered in scratches. Guy then yells out, "Don't yell, I already cut my fingernails down." And then says one of the most off the wall shit ever. "I didn't want to miss baby night."
he said it was cool in a like a necrophilia kind of way. Like, did he just make a joke about fucking his wife if she was dead?
Yeah. Yeah.
This guy's awful. Somebody cut this guy's nuts off.
He's like, "You were passed out and I decided to fuck your limp unconscious body."
Yeah,
And then makes a joke about it, which is not funny, is very gross. It's a very that's a very weird thing. What really makes it bad is she was sick to the point where he had to carry her to the bed, and she's basically like can't even hold her eyes open. She doesn't feel good. And then he's like, does that? Like, that's, I think anybody would be like, yeah, I didn't feel good and I passed out and you decided to do what to me? It's just weird.
I decided to not fuck you, but invite the whole local retirement home in to watch
Yeah.
a demon fuck you.
Yeah, she's pissed, as she should be, and his excuse was that he was a bit drunk himself, so no big deal. It cancels each other out.
You pretty much raped me, so
So a few weeks later, Rosemary's period is late, and she decides to go to a doctor her friend recommended named Dr. Hill. He takes her blood and does a pregnancy test. This is obviously back before they had the pee on a stick instant test. And a couple of days later, Dr. Hill calls Rosemary to inform her that she is indeed with child. He says that according to the math, the due date is June 28th of 1966, which means her baby is to be born on 666. Rosemary is very excited to hear the news and informs Guy the moment he walks in the door.
we get a hint too. I don't know if you caught this from the doctor asking her to come back in. And he says, we didn't take enough blood. And she's like, you didn't take, is everything all right? And he's like, yeah, you're pregnant, but we didn't take enough blood. So clearly in her blood test, he's seen something was off.
Something weird.
And he was going to test to I guess, do a more in-depth check. Unfortunately, that never happens, but I thought that was another great hint that the movie threw in there.
Yeah, so she tells him, and he doesn't have, like, the most exciting reaction. He does this very generic, like, "Oh, that's great." And then he looks Rosemary directly in the fucking eyes and says, "You know what I really want to do? Tell Minnie and Roman. You know, the old-ass neighbors we just fucking met a few months ago." And then he runs out of the door like a schoolboy ready for summer break.
Yeah, at this point, even watching it your first time, you got to be picking up on something. Something's off here.
So Minnie and Roman then come over, seeming to be way more excited than Guy, and Minnie talks Rosemary into ditching Dr. Hill because it just so happens that one of her good friends is the best baby doctor in the whole country, a man named Dr. Saplestein. We now see that Rosemary is wearing the necklace Minnie gave her, and after her appointment with Dr. Saplestein, he tells her not to take any supplements or vitamins, and Minnie will make her a special nutrients-rich shake that she is supposed to drink daily. So the producer, William Castle, remember, he is the one that got the rights to make the movie, and he planned to direct it, but he was shot down by the studio executives. Well, he said, "Can you at least let me play the part of Dr. Saperstein?" And they refused to let him do that too. Like,
You talking about the producer?
yeah.
And he actually took a lot of heat from this movie, probably more than anybody else too.
He actually too. I watched interviews with Roman Polanski, and he says that even though they didn't necessarily see eye to eye on some stuff, he did say that William Castle went up to bat for him with the studio because he was over budget and late. And William Castle, who was on the set, which is rare, producers not normally there all the time. They show up like here or there. But it's rare for him to also like always be there, always trying to put fires out and do what he could. But he also was constantly battling with Paramount over giving him more time, giving him more money.
Paramount must have fucking hated this guy.
Yeah, you can actually see an interview with the Roger Evans, the he was the head of Paramount at the time, and he's the one who greenlighted this film, but also wouldn't let William Castle direct it. And you can see him; he is still alive, and he's very much one of those LA fucking super tanned old guys that still dresses like 80s businessman. But he talks about it, and you can tell that he very much looks down on B horror movie directors. He still to this day doesn't really speak too favorably about William Castle's his work of what he did. He didn't show it any respect really at all.
Yeah, it sucks because William Castle actually purchased the rights to this to make a movie with the plans, I assume, to direct it and make the movie. And now he can't even get a fucking small ass part in his own movie he produced.
Yeah, he supposedly had put his house up for collateral, and the reason that he wanted to make this movie was because he could never get anybody to let him direct like a seriously good horror movie. And he thought, well, what I need to do is I need to beat everybody to the punch and buy the rights to a book that would make a good movie. So he does this with hopes that he's finally going to get his shot to direct a masterpiece horror film. And then, Paramount tells him, well, we're willing to give you money for it and you make it, but you're not allowed to direct it. And he had to take that deal because he had his fucking house on the line. He had everything on the line. He was backed into a corner.
Yeah, the show has his daughter on the Shutter Curse films. And he is actually one of the people that they do talk about. So he took a lot of heat. So he went into like a depression after this because he was getting like death threats and all types of horrible shit from super religious people. And then right after filming this, he got really bad kidney stones, ended up in the hospital. It's like worse than a normal case. He was in the hospital for a while. I don't know if an infection developed from it, but he ended up years later, lost a daughter. I believe to cancer. May not have been to cancer, some illness. He lost one of his adult daughters, and then his other daughter had a child, and the child died as a baby. And then after that, his wife ended up getting Alzheimer's at an extremely young age and lived out with that. He took care of her for like 15 years until she died from her Alzheimer's. So yeah,
Jeez.
he is, they don't know if it's some people associate it with the curse, but he had a really rough time after this movie.
We then see Rosemary walk into the apartment after running some errands, and she has cut her hair into like a very short pixie style that I'm sure my co-host here just loved.
Yeah.
This is your favorite haircut.
Yep. Guy is an asshole, but I'd have been upset about that fucking haircut too. Like, what the fuck were you thinking?
But the most important part here is that she informs Guy that she has started to feel a sharp pain in her stomach. She then goes to see her doctor, and he tells her it is perfectly normal and the pain should be gone in 2 days. We then fast forward a little bit, and Rosemary has begun to eat raw meat to satisfy her cravings. She also started to lose weight and her skin color. Hutch comes over to visit and remarks that Rosemary looks unhealthy. She tries to tell him that the doctor says she is perfectly healthy, but Hutch thinks he must be wrong. During his visit, Roman comes knocking on the door. She introduces Roman to Hutch, and you can see that there's a little bit of friction between these two.
Yeah, specifically, I don't know if you noticed Roman's face when Hutch is leaning over, looking at the necklace.
Yeah,
but he's not in focus, but he is very bothered by the...
Oh, yeah. So Hutch is like, yeah, she doesn't look too healthy. I don't know about this Sapertine guy. But Roman is like, oh no, she's doing great. Sapertine is like the best, and this is totally normal. And another thing they clash on is commercial vitamin pills. Roman's like, they aren't safe, but Hutch is like, they go through this, like some of the most strict testing and guidelines there is. And like these two are being nice to each other, but you can tell that there is this whole like, there can only be one distinguished old rich white guy in this group.
Yeah, and Roman, his fight back to the pills is, well, they sit on the shelf sometimes for years, and they lose their potency, and it's just complete bullshit. This is the point where Hutch is asking all the questions that we
Yeah.
want to ask, and he's definitely one of my favorite characters in the movie, although he's not in it a whole lot.
So Rosemary mentions her Tanis root good luck charm, and Hutch is like, I know every goddamn herb and root in this world, and I've never heard of that. He then looks at it and tells Rosemary that it is not a root, but more like a fungus or mold. He then remarks that the Castevets seem to be taking better care of Rosemary than her own parents. Very subtle jab, I think
Yeah.
that was. Roman leaves, and while Hutch and Rosemary are chatting in the kitchen, Guy suddenly comes home early from the theater. I don't know, almost like Roman called him. Hutch then says that he must be going, and Guy jumps up to grab Hutch's coat for him. This ends up being a very important scene. And as he puts his coat on, he discovers one of his gloves missing. And as soon as Hutch leaves, Guy tells Rosemary that he is going to run and get a paper. Later that night, Hutch calls Rosemary on the phone and tells her that he has something very important to talk to her about, but it must be in person. They agree to meet at 11 a.m. in front of the Time Life building. After the call, Guy begins to ask Rosemary what Hutch needed to tell her and what was so important, and she ends up telling him that about their meeting in the morning. And as soon as she tells him the time and place, he suddenly has the urge to go get an ice cream cone. He leaves the apartment. We then hear him exit the apartment, walk a few steps down the hallway, and ring Minnie and Roman's doorbell.
Yeah. What a shitty excuse. I gotta go get ice cream.
Yeah.
It's like I gotta return some videotapes.
So yeah, the reason that I say him getting Hutch's jacket is important is, we eventually kind of learned that Guy steals Hutch's glove, and then immediately when he goes to get his paper, immediately takes it over to Roman and Minnie. The next day, we see Rosemary waiting outside of the Time Life building, but Hutch never arrives. After an hour or so, she then calls Hutch's number, and a lady named Grace Cardiff answers the phone and informs her that Hutch suddenly went into a deep coma and was taken to the hospital early this morning. A few weeks later, we see that Rosemary is having a great deal of pain in her stomach. She then attends a New Year's Eve party at the Castevets' place, where Dr. Saperstein also happens to be in attendance. She briefly tries to discuss her issue with the doctor, but he claims it is normal and she just has bad joints. The clock then strikes midnight, and Roman makes a toast to everyone, saying, 1966, the year is one, which everybody in the room seems to understand except for Rosemary. Rosemary then begins to plan a party at their apartment for all of their younger friends and tells Guy that Minnie and Roman are not invited. And at this point, she decides that she is no longer going to drink Minnie's health smoothie and begins to secretly pour it out in the sink. During the party, many of Rosemary's friends comment on how sick she looks. She eventually breaks down in the kitchen and tells them how she has been in a lot of pain for the past 4 months. They explain that this is not normal and she needs to go get a second opinion from Dr. Hill. After the party, Rosemary tells Guy that she is going to see Dr. Hill Monday. Guy flips out and calls her friends a bunch of not very bright bitches.
Yeah, he calls them bitches a couple times.
I was
too.
like, what? Wow, that's what kind of diss is that? Like, you're not a very bright bitch.
Yeah, he
Kind of
is.
sounds like something Cat Williams would say.
These goddamn Hollywood bitches. Yeah, if she wasn't concerned about her husband before this is kind of crazy. He clearly panics in this scene. I
Oh,
think they
yeah.
do a really good job of showing him panic. One of his excuses is about her going to see Dr. Hill is that it wouldn't be fair to Dr.
Yeah, oh my
Saperstein.
God.
And
Yeah.
then he literally says, quote, "You want a second opinion, go see Dr. Saperstein and talk to him about it." That's not a second
Same.
opinion.
No, he said, let him choose who gives you the second opinion. Like,
Yeah, go talk to the doctor who's already that gave you the first opinion and talk to him about getting a second opinion. What kind of fucking sense does that make?
he calls Dr. Hill a Charlie nobody.
Yeah.
I said, damn, I gotta call somebody that. I gotta use that.
That was a fucking major diss.
Probably back
That was
then.
1966. That's a slap in the fucking face.
Did you just call me a Charlie nobody?
I'm a Charlie
it's
nobody.
on. It's on, motherfucker.
Your wife's a fucking scuzzy.
He kills him and like goes to court and the judge is like, what's your excuse? And be like, well, he called me a Charlie nobody. And the judge said, oh, case dismissed. That's too far. I don't blame you. This causes Rosemary to go off on Guy when suddenly the pain in her stomach disappears and she feels the baby kick for the first time. Guy is more interested in what Rosemary put in her health shake when she interrupts him to put his hand on her stomach to feel the baby move, but Guy quickly pulls his hands away and nervously laughs. And then he's like, oh, I gotta clean up. I gotta clean up from the party.
Yeah, this was the one part of the movie coming up that I didn't really care for. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So before this, she's like tired of getting pushed around by these old people. She's had enough of it. She's like, I'm not drinking these fucking shakes anymore. Like something's going on. After Hutch ends up in this coma, she's had enough. She's like, I'm done. I'm going to a different doctor. I don't want these old people bringing me drinks. And then she feels the baby move, and then all that goes out the window. She's right back on board. Like the next scene is her drinking the shakes and them setting up the baby room, and she's fucking super close to the neighbors again.
While setting up their nursery, Rosemary gets a phone call from Grace informing her that Hutch has passed away. She attends his funeral a couple days later, where Grace tells her that the doctors never could figure out what was wrong with Hutch or exactly what killed him. He did shortly regain consciousness before his death, making the nurse swear that Rosemary would get a message and a book in the event that he died. Hutch's message was that the name was an anagram, and to look through the book that was on his desk. Rosemary takes the book home and opens the wrapping to find a book about witchcraft called All of Them Witches.
So going back to the curse thing, so composer Christoph Kamita, I hope I'm saying that right. So he ends up dying. He's the first one in the curse. Like this is shortly after filming, I think within a couple months, before it even came out. He ends up in a coma for 4 months and becomes brain dead. And the details surrounding the coma are very unclear.
Wow.
There's a couple different stories. Roman Polanski said they were hanging out with another mutual friend of theirs, and they kind of got in a scuffle, and he fell and hit his head, which ended up leading to him being in a coma. And the doctors were never really able to come up with really good reason why he went into a coma and became brain dead and died 4 months after filming. But it was very strangely similar to Hutch's death in the movie.
Wow.
And it's the composer that did the whole movie.
That's crazy.
Like even the beginning where she's doing that like lullaby coming in, he composed all that. He composed everything for this movie. And before it even came out, he was dead.
Wow. Inside the book, she sees parts that have been highlighted by Hutch. The first thing we see is the devil's pepper, a fungus with a strong pungent odor that is used in rituals and worn on charms. She also finds a chapter on Adrian Marcato, who, if you remember, lived in the Bramford, and he was attacked after he stupidly announced that he had summoned the devil. We then see a photo of his family, which included his wife and young son, Stephen. And this is the point where I realized that that was not Abraham Lincoln watching the Satan bust his devil nut. It was actually Adrian Marcato, but he definitely favors Abe Lincoln. While using so while using Scrabble pieces to figure out the anagram, she discovers that Hutch didn't mean the title of the book was an anagram, but that Roman Castevet's name was the anagram. And Roman is the son of Adrian Marcato, and his real name is Stephen Marcato. She then shows the book to Guy and explains Roman's real identity. Of course, Guy blows this off and laughs at the idea of Roman being a witch like his father. He definitely tries to gaslight the shit out of Rosemary here.
So when she goes to put that book on the shelf, you see a book by Sammy Davis Jr. on the bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually dabbling into Satanism at the time. This is a couple years after Anthony LaVey had came out with he officially announced the Church of Satan, or the Temple of Satan, and he actually worked on this movie. He didn't have an official job, but it was said at least multiple times in the Shudder documentary that he didn't have an official job. What do they call it whenever you they use you for like?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But anyway, he worked on this too. Basically, as far as like a lot of the satanic stuff that was in it, they used him as to kind of give reference and to help out with a lot of the stuff to make it as realistic as possible. And he was a consultant. That's what he was. So at one point they mentioned that it was rumored that he was a consultant, but there was actually people in the Shudder episode that actually worked on the movie and talked about some of the stuff, him talking about details of a lot of the relationship of the cast and stuff during the movie. But him and Roman Polanski did know each other.
Oh, wow. So the next day, she tells Dr. Saperstein about Roman's real father. He agrees with her and then informs her that Roman only has a month or two left to live, and they were planning on going on one last vacation to Roman's favorite cities. A few days later, Roman and Minnie leave. Rosemary finds out that Guy threw away her book from Hutch, and we see her toss the Tannis root necklace into the sewer. She also picks up a couple of other books on witchcraft, where she finds a section that discusses the coven's ability to blind, deafen, paralyze, and kill the chosen victims, as long as the group manages to possess one of the chosen's belongings. So, Hutch's glove? Dun dun dun. She then calls Donald Baumgart, who is still blind and without any explanation, and discovers that right before he lost his vision, Guy met with him and talked him into trading neckties. So Guy managed to get a personal item from Donald, and the very next day he goes blind. What a coincidence.
Yeah, this was really slick on Rosemary's part too, to think to even call him, and kind of the way she guided through that conversation to get that out of him. And you really notice that Rosemary is a lot more sharper and on things when she doesn't have the Tannis root. Because when she's going in the bookstore, she throws the necklace either by or in the storm drain, getting rid of the Tannis root. And there's a couple times when she stops drinking it, like at the party, you notice she's a lot more sharper. So you can tell this Tannis root throughout the movie is kind of keeping her, although a lot of these things to the audience seem very obvious, it's kind of keeping her in a cloudy state.
Yeah, in the book, they talk about the Tannis root is really good at keeping someone like under control, kind of docile. It makes it where you can kind of do things where they won't really notice them. But if they didn't have the Thanos root, they'd be like, "Why the fuck are you doing that?" Or "Why, what's going on here?" But yeah, it's essentially trying to, I mean, it doesn't give you complete control over that person, but it gives you that kind of little bit of an edge on them.
Yeah, and that I think they do a really good job conveying that in the movie without actually ever coming out and saying it. Because you can tell the 2 times that she does quit taking the shakes and then she gets rid of the necklace, she is much more clear. Like she figured out that book that Hutch left her, like that puzzle.
Yeah.
That shit would have taken me fucking forever to figure out. She's definitely a lot more sharper, brain wise, mentally.
So Rosemary has now realized that Guy has been working with the coven the whole time. She says, "Fuck this, I gotta get out of here." She then grabs some cash and personal items and quickly leaves the apartment. She goes straight to Dr. Saperstein's office, where during the conversation with the receptionist, she mentions that Saperstein tends to wear the Thanos root aftershave sometimes. This tips off Rosemary that the doctor is also involved with the coven, and she quickly leaves the office. Rosemary uses a payphone to call Dr. Hill, and he agrees to see her at his office. The guy who is standing outside the payphone booth that Rosemary thinks is Dr. Saperstein following her is actually producer William Castle.
Oh, he did get in the movie.
He got a cameo.
That's what they gave him.
Yep.
That fucking part.
That part.
That sucks.
She arrives at Dr. Hill's office and begins to explain how her husband, neighbors, and doctor are all in this witchcraft coven and they want her baby. He agrees to help her and has her lie down while he tries to get her a hospital room so she could have her baby. She naps for a while when she is suddenly awakened by Dr. Hill opening the door to reveal that he called Guy and Dr. Saperstein to come get her, believing that she was having some kind of mental breakdown.
So we know Dr. Saperstein, officially, we know at this point he's in on it. You probably picked up on that much sooner in the movie. My question was, and I meant to rewind it and go back and look, did you see if Dr. Saperstein was in the dream sequence when they're going back and forth, when she's being raped by the devil and all the naked people are in the room?
Yes, he is.
He is in there?
Yes.
Okay,
He's
I
in the
wondered
back.
that.
He's in the background, and obviously you don't pick up on him originally because
You don't even know him yet.
he hasn't been brought into the story. But
Yep.
yeah, he is back there.
Yeah, when he was first brought in, I actually had that in my notes to go back and rewind and check, but I didn't, so I figured I'd ask you if you noticed it.
I only noticed it because obviously I had done my first watch at kind of the beginning of the week and my second watch kind of at the end of the week, so I had kind of seen them back to back, and I happened to see his face back there, and I had just watched the movie before, so his face was instantly recognizable to me.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they threw that major hint in there. That's kind of cool. I'm glad they did that.
It's dark and he's in the background. There's a, couple people kind of standing in front of him. So yeah, I mean, you don't really notice him without looking for him or being familiar with him. But Rosemary at first opposes going with them until Saperstein threatens to have her committed to a mental hospital. Rosemary agrees and they place her in a car and drive her back to the Bramford. When she arrives, she purposely dumps her purse out all over the lobby. When Guy and the doctor start to pick her stuff up, she runs into an elevator and closes the door. With Guy and Saperstein chasing close behind her, she makes it into the apartment and barricades the door. While trying to call for help, somehow Guy and other members of the coven sneak into the back of the apartment and rush Rosemary. They hold her down on the bed as Saperstein tries to inject her with a sedative. The doctor then realizes that Rosemary is going into labor, and Rosemary then blacks out. So, this is important for the very beginning of the movie. They also explain this way better in the book. But you remember the big dresser? Well, that was in front of this closet, and we're about to shed some light on all of this, the whole kind of beginning of the movie.
Yeah, and you definitely pick up on this if you're watching it for the first time, and you're like, how the fuck did they get in?
Yeah, I thought I missed something, like, when I first seen it, like,
No.
wait a minute, what?
No, I knew that closet was going to come back into play. I thought it was hilarious, though, when she looks at them and they're tiptoeing past the door. It totally looked like Scooby and Shaggy in an episode of Scooby-Doo tiptoeing.
All right, so the story goes that Mrs. Gardenia was a member of the coven. She was the one that actually grew all the herbs for the coven's rituals. And she ended up having a falling out with her best friend Minnie and decided that she was going to leave the coven. This greatly upset Minnie and a bunch of the other members, and they kind of snuck in and stole a personal item of hers and then cast the spell to put her in the coma, just like Hutch. So she knew that they were out to get her, and this is why she kind of placed that dresser in front of the secret doorway between her and the Castavet's apartment. Yeah, this doorway through the closet is how they were able to sneak in to Rosemary's place. And, and this is also why after that lady died, Minnie had to start her own herb garden because now the person who grows the herbs is gone. So you learn this whole previous story where they had to kind of kill off one of their members because the member was leaving and yeah, there's this whole thing. This is why you also see that letter where she says, I can no longer associate myself. Yeah, this is her leaving the coven.
Yeah, they definitely, that's not in the movie, but I did pick up, like I asked when we first started going through the plot, I noted in the very beginning that I thought, the coma situation was that kind of all set up. However, I did not put together that she was actually leaving the coven. I thought maybe she was at the end of her lifespan and they kind of set this plan in motion to get somebody else in there and ultimately end up being Rosemary. But I had a feeling that the coma was associated with them the same way kind of Hutch had the coma. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I kind of wish they would have shed a little bit more light on that part in the movie.
Also, how did she move that big dresser by herself? She was like 89. Magic. That's how it was done. So Rosemary eventually comes to and is told that unfortunately the baby didn't survive the birth. Guy tries to tell her that she will be all right and they will try again for another child, and he immediately starts telling her how well his career is doing. I know your baby just died, but, I'm going to be in a movie.
Yeah, he's a motherfucker. The doctor's a motherfucker, too, because the doctor, blames her when he goes in and tells her. It's the doctor was in the wrong position. We could have did something had we been able to get to the hospital, but, she was having this break. He totally blames her for losing the baby. And then Guy is like, yeah, but my career's doing great. You're going to be fine. We'll make another baby. Get over it.
And then he says, what makes it worse is he says, I got to run now and get famous. That's what you said to your wife who thinks her baby just died. Over the next few days, the coven is keeping someone at Rosemary's side as a guard. They are also giving her sleeping pills to keep her mostly sedated. But she begins to start hearing a baby cry through the wall in Roman's apartment. They try to explain this by informing her that a new couple just moved in and they have a child. She doesn't believe this bullshit and starts planning her next move. She even starts pretending to take the sleeping pill while secretly hiding them in the bedpost. Once she finally gets a chance to be alone, she makes her move to finally find out just what the fuck is going on here. She grabs a large kitchen knife and enters into the secret doorway into Roman and Minnie's place. As she quietly walks through their apartment, she sees pictures of the Vatican on fire and witches dressed in black cloaks. She can also hear that there is a large gathering in the living room. She slowly walks in holding the large knife and sees everyone just kind of mingling around in the living room, surrounding a large black bassinet with an upside down crucifix hanging from it.
Not gonna lie, this bassinet's fucking dope.
I agree.
I would totally get this bassinet.
A guy spots her and quickly stands up until he sees she's holding a knife and then quickly sits back down like the slimy coward he is. Laura Louise lets out a loud scream and everyone looks at Rosemary. Rosemary then tells Roman to shut up and slowly walks towards the bassinet. She then slowly pulls back the black lace and looks down at her baby. Her eyes get wide and she places her hand over her mouth in shock and disbelief. She then yells, "What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?" Which is probably one of the most famous sayings from any horror movies. This is like the thing that everyone knows from this movie. And Roman says he has his father's eyes. Rosemary is confused by this and states that Guy has normal eyes when Roman announces that Guy isn't the father, Satan is. Because he came up from hell and had a son with a begotten woman. And then everyone yells, "Hail Satan."
Hail Satan.
Roman then stands up and says that the child's name is Adrian and he will grow older and lay ruin to the temples, redeem the despised, and wreak vengeance on the name of the burned and tortured. And then everyone begins to shout, "Hail Adrian" and "Hail Satan." So the lead actor who played Roman was actually really uncomfortable with the Hail Satan stuff. And he was quoted before filming the scene that nothing good would come of this Hail Satan stuff.
Yeah. That was the time then.
That was the time then, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if there's any significance to the name Adrian. Because that's a really weird name.
He names it after his dad. That's his dad's name.
No, it's Satan.
No. Roman's dad.
Oh,
Adrian Marcato.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't catch that.
Who was the first person ever to conjure the devil out of hell. He kind of, this whole thing kind of starts with him doing that. So Minnie then tells Rosemary that Satan chose her out of all the women in the world. Rosemary then stumbles back in disbelief and screams, "No, it can't be." She then drops the knife and yells, "Oh God." That little where like she drops the knife and it sticks in the floor and Minnie runs up and grabs the knife and then tries to rub the mark out on the floor. That was actually improvised.
Well, that was improvised very well because that is totally Minnie's character.
Yeah.
And God, I hate Minnie. She's such a fucking... Yeah, I hate her as a kid. Imagine having to have her as a neighbor.
No.
Jesus Christ.
So Roman holds his hands up and yells, "God is dead. Satan lives. The year is won." And then they have this like funny little rhyme. "The year is won. God is done." Roman then walks over to Rosemary and says to her, "Why don't you just help us out and be a real mother to Adrian?" And that Minnie and Laura are too old to raise him. Laura Louise tries to be a bitch to Rosemary, telling her to shut up or she will kill her, when another member tells her to be quiet and show some respect to Adrian's mother. Guy then tries to talk to Rosemary, telling her that they promised him that she wouldn't be hurt. It's pretty much the same as if she lost a baby during childbirth, and they are getting so much in return that it's worth it.
This is like one of the most fucked up parts of the movie for me. When Roman's telling her, and he literally says, "You don't have to join, but at least be a mother to your child." It's like, they're like, "We don't feel like taking care of a baby. Like, we'll have you take care of the baby."
I mean, it makes sense.
That we had you raped and to have our half Satan, half human, Antichrist, Satan take over the world child, but we don't feel like fucking raising a baby. Nobody here, we're all old. Just do your part and be a fucking mother.
Yeah, so after Guy tells her this bullshit, his reasoning, she then, rightly so, spits right in his smug fucking face. And I loved it.
She just stabbed him in his fucking smug face.
Well, she dropped the knife, so yeah, that spit's as good as she's got. Then the baby begins to cry loudly. Laura Louise is over there rocking the shit out of him. Rosemary gets up and walks over to the child. Laura tells her to get away, but Roman tells Laura to go sit her frumpy double chin having ass down with the others and allows Rosemary to rock the baby. As Rosemary begins taking care of the child, the whole coven surrounds her with smiles on their faces. Rosemary then accepts her responsibility as the boy's mother. She looks down upon him with a happy look on her face, and then we get a wide shot of the Bramford as the credits start to roll. And that is the end of Rosemary's Baby.
And at the end, Rosemary's maternal instincts were stronger than everything else going on. Looks like she's going to raise the baby.
They actually describe what the baby looks like in the book, and he has claws. They actually have to put little gloves on him so his claws don't, gouge his fucking face. He has those, of course, he has those yellow eyes that we see earlier in the movie. He has hoofs for feet. Yeah, he is very creepy looking.
Yeah, they kind of mention a little bit like the hooves, and briefly Roman mentions like look at his hooves or look at his legs or something like that. You want so badly at the end of this movie to get to see the baby because of her reaction when she first sees it. It makes you want to see it so bad. But I'm so glad that they didn't show it, because leaving it up to your imagination, I feel like, is so much scarier. And for the time,
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been really hard for them to make a baby with hooves and giant claws and like this half
contacts.
demon. Yeah. And for it to look decent. So I think it was the right choice not to show it.
They actually discussed it, and Roman Polanski was, matter of fact, I think the producer, William Castle, wanted the baby shown. And Roman Polanski was like, no, we're not doing that because it's going to be so much better if we just leave it up for the Basically, like their imagination is going to be able to do so much more than what our special effects could ever do.
Yep, I agree.
Good choice.
Yep.
Yeah, there is like more detail at the end of the book as well. It's the same, but it's slightly different. You get kind of more of what's going on in Rosemary, like her thought process about this whole thing. And she does decide to raise the child, but she says that there is one part where she actually contemplates grabbing the baby and jumping out of the window and killing herself and the baby. She decides against that. She ends up taking care of it, but then she actually decides that she is going to inform the Vatican about all of this, and she's going to let them decide what to do with Adrian. So she's going to raise him until the Vatican figures out how to handle this situation.
Well, I think it was a good call of them ending the movie where they did. It's a very,
that's a good ending for a book.
Very grim ending for the movie. It's after all that she's been through, after all she did to try to prevent it at the end, they still end up with the baby. It's this half Satan, half baby, but at the end, her maternal instincts, Baton.
Baby Satan, Baton.
Yeah, her maternal instincts end up prevailing, and she's stuck in this awful situation, but her love for the baby ends up taking over. Maybe not her love for the baby, but her, it's her baby. She doesn't want somebody else to raise her baby. And she ends up being stuck making this awful choice. And I think it was a great, I don't think they could have ended the movie any better.
Well, I think it's amazing storytelling, because if you really look into the core of her decision to eventually just take care of the baby, is very similar to what we see in real life, where if you have a criminal, like somebody that does something so terrible that people call him a monster, typically his mother still loves him. And is still probably the only person that's there for him amongst, trial, jail, all this stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I just watched the documentary earlier about the 13-year-old who'd stabbed his sister to death, and the only person there for him was his mom still. And she knew. She's like, he's such a hard person to love, but, I've already lost one kid. That does happen a lot. I think another good thing to compare it to is when, and it unfortunately it does happen, when women get raped and they end up pregnant. but they end up raising the baby and, taking care of the baby anyway, despite the circumstances.
So this story is very similar to the short story The Yellow Wallpaper, where a sick woman who is locked away in her apartment room surrounded by yellow wallpaper. Her isolation leads to her madness as she begins to see things living in the wallpaper. Rosemary's apartment bedroom is decorated in yellow wallpaper. And as she becomes sick from the pregnancy, she begins to become paranoid and starts her quick descent into madness as well.
Yeah. Interesting.
The original cut ran over 4 hours.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Polanski could not decide what to cut. He couldn't cut anything. So he actually asked editor Sam Osteen to decide. Sam would later direct the sequel, Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby, in 1976. Yeah. So this guy had to go in and cut a ton of footage and make this movie make sense while removing so much of it.
He probably really, really stuck to the book then if it was 4 hours long.
Well, the thing is, the book is not super long, and they cut very, very little things from the book in this movie. I'm talking about very little things. Like, that ending I told you about, and that whole scene where she looks out of the window waiting for him to come out of the building, but he never does. And then the only major thing they cut out of the story was the day that they're gonna, make the baby. Her sister, who she doesn't speak to at all, she didn't speak to any of her family, calls her and says, I just had a really bad feeling that something was going to happen to you today. And will you please just stay at your house? Don't leave your house today. That was really the only major part of the story that they cut from the book. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe he made scenes like way longer. I don't know. In Son of Rosemary, Andy tells his mom that the reason conception happened when it did was because Satan wanted a Christ-like figure to emerge right when the millennium happens to help lead humanity in a certain direction. By raping Rosemary in 1966-67, he ensured that Andy would be about 33 or 34 years old when the millennium happened, which is about the same age as Christ.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You said that's in the second one?
Yep, that's in the sequel. Ratings and kill count. So, total kills, 2. 3 if you count a bonus kill. You have Terry, who committed suicide / maybe had been murdered by jumping or falling from the apartment window.
She was cleaning the windows, you know that.
At night. We have Edward Hutchins, who was cursed by the coven off screen. And you got your bonus, Miss Gardenia, who was killed by the coven / witchcraft.
Yeah, it's hard to count her. You don't even get to see her.
That's why I kind of gave you a bonus, but her death does play a role in the story.
You gotta add bonuses in there when you have so few kills on a kill count.
Too. So favorite kill, I think this is super easy, Terry, because it's the only one we actually see.
Yeah, I didn't even do a favorite kill because it was the only one. Yeah, definitely Terry. Terry landing on that fucking Volkswagen, which I think a lot of people miss, is the dented up Volkswagen that she landed on.
All right, so time for the rating. I rated this movie a 4.4. I love the story of the film. The thing about the story is there's so much hidden stuff. There's so many things. Like, there's a lot of layers to this story. Another cool thing about the story is because it's unique, it makes you want to see what happens next. Like, I want to see what occurs as she's raising this kid. Like, that's a good story when it makes you want it to keep going. You really want it to keep going. You really wanted to see the rest of it. The cinematography is a huge bump for this movie. The way it was filmed was really good. It did an excellent job at making you actually feel things, especially with like the continuous shots. But the acting from some of these people is incredible, especially Mia Farrow, who plays Rosemary, and Ruth Gordon, who played Minnie. I would say that if they were going to do the remake, which I know they already remade it, what they should have done, what I would like to see, is this movie as like an A24 or Neon like type style, and somebody like Ari Aster or Oz Perkins to direct it.
Yeah.
I think if you were going to dead set on making a fucking remake, it should have been done that way.
Yeah,
In my opinion.
I agree.
I don't think the
Neon.
remake touches what makes this movie special.
Yeah, I think if they would have did that independent, like a very well done, like you said, A24 Neon, I think because those movies are really great with their cinematography. They're beautiful shot movies. And that's one of the things that set this movie apart.
I would love to see a remastered, brighter version like we did with The Exorcist recently. I would love to see the colors pop in this movie a little more, because I do feel like, because they filmed it on probably like Panavision or something, you get a lot of flat color tone in it. But yeah, I would love to see it, especially like somebody with like Oz Perkins doing this movie, because he's really good at hiding those little hints throughout the movie. I think he would fucking kill this movie if he did it. But the problem is with this is trying to find somebody that's so good at playing this character like Mia Farrow is, and even Ruth Gordon, who plays Minnie and is super annoying, but she is very good at being very believable at this.
What would you think about like a Mia Goth playing Rosemary?
That's possible. I mean,
I think
hard
she's
to
just
say because
she's I think she's really good at portraying emotions.
she is like, I'm trying to compare it to something I've seen her in where she kind of plays that like innocent girl, because a lot of the stuff we've seen her in lately, she kind of plays like a bad girl kind of, or a crazy person. But I think she could pull it off.
I do. I think she could pull it off. I don't have anybody else off the top of my head that would be
No,
good at playing
that's
that.
that's a hard call.
I'm sure there's people out there though that could pull it off. It's just a really hard movie to touch because it's one of the classics. In those scenarios, I'd rather just not see them remake it, but they've already remade it.
Yeah, yeah. And they're gonna remake it again.
Yeah. Well, if they do, I hope that they do it justice, at least. My rating was a 4.3. Pretty much a lot of the same reasons you went through. It's a beautiful shot film. The cinematography and the way it was shot was done great. We seem to get these shots that are done in a way that really hides what's going on and who's in on it, just enough to not get the full picture until the end. And it really makes you, as a viewer for the first time, you're really paranoid. Like,
Yeah.
when she's in that phone booth and that guy comes up, like, you really are paranoid at this point as to who she can trust. Yeah, I think they did a fantastic job with that. The story was amazing. I think it was done at a perfect time. Like I mentioned earlier, the late 60s, when the Church of Satan and the occult were really gaining traction and becoming known in the mainstream. And I don't think there's a better time that they could have done this movie, despite it leading to some negative stuff for the people who did it. I think that's a big part of what really puts it in puts it at the level that it was at, why it's still talked about and remembered. That, the cinematography, the story, like you mentioned, with a lot of the stuff that is hidden throughout. This is one of those movies, and we've talked about it many a times on this show, those movies that you can watch and then there's so much stuff hidden throughout them that it's almost better watching it on the second time and knowing the story and picking up on all these things you missed. I love when a movie does that. Overall, it's a classic, and it's definitely a must watch for any true fan of the genre.
Yeah, this movie whether you like it or not, it paved the way. It opened the door for movies like The Exorcist and The Omen. Because like we said, like this movie was such a controversial thing because it was a big movie that was going to talk about witchcraft and Satan. And, that opened the door for, the exorcist to do the exorcism and all the crazy shit that happens in that. And then The Omen, where essentially you have, Satan's like son as a child, and you see he's looks cute, but he's evil. Those movies branched off of this movie. Looking at the story, we've seen so many like, oh, the devil does this, the devil does that. We've seen that a ton by now, but back in 67, 68, that wasn't a common thing. This was a whole new fucking story that no one had ever heard. So can you imagine, like, I wish that I could have watched this movie not knowing the ending already. Because it was such a famous movie and the whole famous, like, oh my God, what'd you do to his eyes? Like, the first time I seen it, I already knew kind of the big reveal at the end. I would have loved to have been able to see this movie not knowing what to expect.
Yeah. Like I said, man, it's just a classic. Definitely a must watch.
Yeah, great pick. We appreciate you guys throwing that out there to us, and we were really happy to do that one. But once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website, check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or your grandparents' satanic coven about the show, and we hope to see you next time. Got any last words?
I just want to know who's changing baby Satan's diapers. It's not me.
The year is one. God is done.